All right. We're super excited that you're all here with us this morning. Again, I'm Kelsey Pike, Saif recruiter and corporate trainer. Saif is a workers' compensation not-for-profit headquartered in Salem. So glad to be here with you all. And I'm joined with my colleague, Cindy.
Yes, good morning. So Kelsey and I have been assembling our superhero tools, and we're hoping to share many of those with you as well as experience them alongside you. As we're thinking about this VILT, I think that could take a lot of different venues and approaches. And so whether it's a 1 hour or a several day or several week in-person led virtually opportunity, we want to make sure that you have some ideas and some tools along the way. So if Kelsey and I are here as our facilitators for today's conversation, we want to go ahead and, Kelsey, would you mind just until that's great. Thank you. We want to go ahead and find out who's in the room with us today. So we've got a couple of questions for you, and we would like to know a little bit about where you primarily work, potentially the age of the learners that you work with, maybe what kind of length of trainings that you might produce, 1 hour, 1 day, a term, semester, something like that. Again, we want to make sure that as we better understand who's in the room, Kelsey and I can offer ideas, suggestions, and examples that might best relate to what you are doing. And then also just better understand what your level of expertise is with the virtual in-person led trainings, or VILT. So I'm going to go ahead and launch some polls so that you can go ahead and answer those. So again, what area do you primarily work? Great. So a fair number of us in higher ed and in the corporate space. So fantastic. So as we go along, as Anna mentioned, I do work at Oregon State. I work both with undergrad, graduate, and adult professionals who are adults who are learning. And so, again, I can offer several ideas in that arena. All right. So another question, I'm going to launch these just a tiny bit faster. What age group of learner? I think I know the answer to this question, but I don't want to make assumptions. All right, so we're pretty much all of us are working with adults. That's great. And then how about this training length? What's the typical length of the training that you create? Is it a 10-minute micro learning? Is it about an hour, a class period or webinar? Is it multi-week, multi-day, or potentially just a standard traditional semester term? Great. So we've got quite a bit of micro learning happening, but we also have those shorter and longer term trainings. So again, Kelsey and I will do our best to offer ideas. And with that said, as we are going along, please use the chat. We understand that we are a group of experts. And so if you have thoughts, examples of things that we are mentioning, or perhaps you want to add to our conversation, please feel free to use the chat to do that.
Yes, absolutely. We want to make this as interactive as possible. So we will be asking for you to chat frequently, if not answer polls. We'll also ask you to annotate on some of these slides. So if you are unfamiliar with that and haven't done that before in Zoom, if you hover over at the very top, you should see a little green bar that says, like, I think it's like screen being shared or something like that. And there's like an option next to that where you can view more options in an annotate feature. And that will bring a nice little annotate feature bar where you can use a pen, you can add a stamp, things like that. So we want to make this very interactive. So with that, we're going to move on to.
Actually, Kelsey, before we do, it'd be
Yeah.
helpful to know the expertise level that you all feel you have with VILT, virtual in-person led trainings. So are you just learning about it and this is a new acronym to you? Is it something you've done in the past? Something you feel pretty comfortable with, or you feel like you could be sharing your screen and chatting along with Kelsey and I?
Yeah, great question, Cindy.
Give you a few more moments to answer that question. Great.
Yeah,
And
it
so,
looks like we're
I
across
think
the board.
you bet, which is perfect. So please be asking those questions. We're going to have some time at the end to answer more dedicated questions. But if there's something you're sort of nagging at you, make sure you're adding that to the chat, or again, sharing those examples. Fantastic. Thank you for that. That's really helpful.
All right. So really today we're going to be focusing on, again, can we incorporate universal design for learning, or UDL, concepts into our strategies, and to create a little bit more of an equitable, accessible learning opportunity, especially in these virtual spaces. And then also recognize how we can use data and different tools to collect data to enhance your training or influence maybe what you're offering to your learners, and kind of prove that return on investment. And then also how we can take a more systematic approach or implementation of andragogical best practices to drive more impactful, engaging learning experiences. So I bet you all thought you're off the hook with engaging with us, but we want to know more about you. Again, yes. At the end of the day, this training is for you. We want to make sure that it's relevant and that we really take this time up front to get to know you and why you're here. So if you wouldn't mind chatting us in that chat box, kind of the one thing, if you kind of what brought you here today, what's that one thing you're hoping to get from our time here?
So as you're reflecting, we're thinking about, Kelsey and I were going to share about UDL, about data, and about systematic implementation.
Yeah.
Great. Thank you, Marianne. That interactivity is really important.
We'll keep those ideas coming, because again, that's going to help influence the rest of this training as well. As we get more into adult learning principles, one of the key things is relevance, right? So we'll talk more about that in a bit, but keep those comments coming in the chat box. And this is where I'd like to have you use that annotate feature, and either kind of stamp or mark with your marker, whatever you would like to do. But let us know on these kind of spectrums here, kind of where do you think your experience is with UDL? Have you used UDL at all? Do you have lots of experience? How often are you utilizing data collection tools? So that's something maybe like an online survey. Are you doing that frequently? And how many best practices does your team deliberately use? We use that term deliberately just because, how often does your team really come together and map out those best practices and for your trainings? All right. And that's good to see. So quite a few of you have quite a bit of experience, or more than average experience with UDL. That's awesome.
Yeah, that's fantastic.
Yeah. So
UDL is something I've been talking about for a while, and it sounds like many of you as well, but that is not a typical response. So that's really encouraging that that needle is moving.
Yeah. All right. Looks like
And
we're about in the average for the data collection tools and kind of all over, a little bit more average and above for how many best practices does your team deliberately use? And what's your mechanism for that? How do you share best practices with your teams? I'm just kind of curious. If you wouldn't mind chatting that out. Faculty development, yeah, informally.
Great.
Absolutely. Definitely does not need to be in a formal setting. Perfect. All right. And I'm going to go ahead and clear these.
Thank you.
Clear the annotations for us.
So as those are getting cleared, and we sort of walk into, we just want to recognize that we're going to be using this little character throughout our time, and this could definitely be understood as an ableist perspective, and that's certainly not our intent. And we really want to just sort of use this as an illustration. So, we would ask that you give us some grace on that, but also understand our intent with this. So if we're going to be talking about access, there's obviously a couple different venues and options that we can be exploring. And the first is, Kelsey, I'm having trouble just clicking, so I'm going to have you do that. I can only annotate still.
Oh, no worries.
So, which is lovely. I don't know that y'all want to watch me draw. That might be painful for everybody. So, so the first thing, if we're going to be talking about access, really we want to be exploring what does that particularly mean. And there's 3 different ways that we could be discussing this element for any individual. And so the first one is universal design. And you'll notice we're going to keep adding tools to our person. And this particular person is now got shoes. And they have shoes because universal design allows someone to go where they need to go, to give them the flexibility to get to wherever that is. So if you think about curb cuts and closed captioning on videos, and even what we've got going on with the closed captioning that's happening as I'm speaking now, all of those things are universal design. Again, that offering that opportunity to move along. The next type of access, thank you, Kelsey, is WCAG, which has more to do with web content. So it's the online resources, it's our websites, it's our internet-based tools, more specifically. And so you notice our little person now has a passport, because this is ensuring that they can get into wherever they are being directed or want to go. And so there are 4 elements. I apologize earlier with the universal design. There are 7 different elements that are associated with that. With this web content access, there are 4. The last area, which is one that you all shared with us that you have a fair amount of understanding around, is universal design. And as you may remember, that's 3 main elements. You'll also notice that our little icon here is a heart, right? Because the universal design is really about empathy and a recognition that we aren't all the same. We don't take in information in the same way, nor do we communicate that information identically. And so it provides choice as well as opportunity. And so we want to just explore those a little more fully, and have us walk through an activity together.
Yeah, so right here, so this is Universal Design for Learning Guidelines. So this is what CAST has put together. And they break UDL into these three elements: multiple means of engagement, multiple means of representation, and multiple means of action and expression. And then within each of those elements are these other different components. So how do we provide options for recruiting interest? So how do we right off the get-go get our learners engaged, and what are the options for that? For representation, what kind of options do I provide to my learner in order to better comprehend the material that is being taught? How do I allow them to express their knowledge in that action and expression piece? Maybe it's not just an exam. Maybe there's other ways that this individual would be able to demonstrate that they have the knowledge necessary to, be a proficient in a particular skill set. So we want you all to work together in a group here to take on maybe one of these because I think we have, let's see, let's break you all out into the same group here. So let's talk about engagement. I think earlier on, we had some comments about kind of interactivity and how to incorporate that interactiveness into training. So maybe we focus on that engagement piece, so that first column there, and have you all work together in a group to come up with either 3 to 5 words of how you would describe each of those components under that engagement piece. So that green column there for each of those components. Or, if you want to come up with an idea of how you might, utilize that component in an upcoming training you have, or maybe you need ideas from the group on how you can maybe implement this into a training that's upcoming. But this is really your time to work with others on this and brainstorm some ideas, and then we'll come back and share. So I'm going to go ahead and assign, let's go ahead and
As Kelsey's doing that, if you have some specific examples where you have already been doing this work, again, we would encourage you to share that with one another, because that's how we all grow. And Kelsey and I were just talking about just the power that comes from these side conversations. Velda, you were mentioning that around conferences. This is another way for us to be able to benefit from that.
Absolutely. So I'm going to go ahead and open this breakout room. And we'll reconvene in about 5 minutes.
We'll see you then. Welcome back.
Hello, everybody. Welcome. All right. Oops, I got ahead of myself. I'm just having fun over here. All right. So welcome. It looks like we have everybody back from the breakout. And we would love if you could chat us maybe 3 to 5 words that you came up with for providing options for recruiting interest. Or maybe an idea that came to mind when you were talking with each other on how you could implement an option for recruiting interest in your next training.
So Kelsey, I'm wondering, as you all are thinking about the conversation that you just, perfect. I was wondering about that, Velda. So tell us a little bit about what you gained from the conversation. And we're going to just let everybody have this group conversation. So was it a specific example that you thought was really powerful? Was it a definition that you came up with for a specific area? Maybe it's around language and symbols. What did you come away with from this conversation? So we'd love to learn from each other, but also validate the things that were shared.
Yeah, giving
Great.
choices. Yes, providing support, immediate feedback. Yep.
Oh, and Velda, I love that safe space. Learning is it's a place of vulnerability. And so being in that space where you're able to really settle in and not be so concerned. That's beautiful.
Mhm.
But others.
You were the recorder. I love that.
Oh, fair, fair, fair.
Well, again, we want this to be an opportunity for you all to share with each other or share things that you might be doing that hit on these different things. So keep them coming in the chat. UDL, well, Cass has kind of put together some definitions, if you will, in each of these components. And you'll have access to this at the end of the training as well, if you want to ever refer back to it to kind of maybe fuel some ideas or something like that when you're trying to incorporate this into a later training. But I do see some more ideas coming in. Yeah, so just listening to ideas, providing clear instructions, aligning them with the learning outcome.
Yeah.
Why are we learning these? Why are we doing these activities? What's the relevance and the relation to what the content is? All of those things, right? We want to know that what we're doing has a point and a purpose,
Mhm.
and that it's going to lead us to where we want to go.
Exactly.
So these are great, great things, and I'm glad that that you all are sharing. So keep it
Yeah.
coming
Yeah.
for
It sounds like
sure.
it was a rich conversation.
Yes, absolutely.
I was tempted to join you all.
I know.
I sat on my hands a little bit just to make sure I was staying here so you all could have that. So that's great. Thank you for sharing those. So again, as you continue to reflect, please use the chat
Mhm.
so we can continue to learn together in that way.
Absolutely.
So if this is what UDL is in making sure that students have access, they have agency, they are in that safe learning space. There are opportunities that we have as learning facilitators to check and see, how are we doing? What are we doing? Is it matching the need? Is it matching, as you mentioned, Wei, the reasons for the learning activities? Is our goal matching the outcome? And so data is just one way that we can do that. And, ultimately, data provides clarity. So our superhero tools are gaining some speed, no pun intended. And so what does that mean when it comes to data? So I'm going to offer a couple ideas here, but I would encourage us as we are talking, if you're like, what we do that is really impactful, please put that in the chat. That would be great. So ultimately, data is that direction giver. It provides a common goal for our future if it's not a path that we've taken in the past. And so this can be done through session feedback. So as I understand, Anna was sharing, y'all are going to be getting a survey to share out, how did this work for you? What were your impressions? Maybe there are some questions being asked about future sessions, those kinds of things. But also the surveys can be something that's just more organically generated. Hey, what do you want to know about? Or what are you thinking about this program? What are you thinking about these ideas? What skills do you want to grow? Those kinds of questions, even if it's not tied to a specific course or VILT session. The other piece, and I suspect because many of us are in higher ed, engagement and the use of an LMS is sort of paramount, right? So you're in that space. You can see how long a student has been in a session. You can see how often do they come back to a specific learning artifact. You can see when the last time they logged in. All of those things are really important pieces and parts to supporting learning. So I'm going to share with you, I I teach instructional design at Oregon State, and I happened to have a student. I felt terrible for her, but she was like, yes, I can do this. She was moving from Hong Kong. She's a Greek citizen. She was moving from, that adds a tiny bit of context. She was moving from Hong Kong, and she was moving to Spain during this whole class. And this was 100% online, mostly asynchronous, so they could do their work, but they had a way to talk with me, camera to camera, should that be a need. And she just wasn't showing up. So I could go look at that engagement and I could see, oh, she's doing her stuff. She's not turning things in. She's looking at resources. She's not turning anything in yet. And some of that had to do with internet connection and moving and all of the things that she was dealing with a cross-continental move. But that engagement information was really important. And again, a powerful, powerful piece. Another element with tools is, the requests. And I sort of spoke to that just a moment ago. What are people asking for? What are they requesting? And I have another example. There was an opportunity to, an instructor said, hey, I really think we need to have X course. This seems to be something that we really need. And so many divisional and departmental leaders got together, lots and lots of conversation about, yes, this course is really important, but nobody asked the learners. Nobody asked who was going to be potentially enrolling in that class. And as a result, the enrollment didn't show the need. Now, there may be a skill gap, and there are other ways to approach that skill gap, but the point is, asking and requesting, us as adults, we want to give that feedback. And so this was, again, data would have been very informative. Another piece of this, so you notice we have our tool belt on, right? And now we have our compass to provide that directional and that directional support. And so that can also give us the opportunity to schedule that timings. So I see, Wei Wei, you mentioned, those faculty meetings, those faculty trainings, those are ongoing typically, right? They usually happen to the end of a term, end of a semester, or even maybe, again, depending on institution, maybe it's right in the middle. But having a decision, when are we talking about data? When are we talking about this? And really making the collective decisions as to how to move and adjust. We can do that individually too as well, right? But that departmental, the divisional piece, we don't necessarily take advantage of. This also speaks to our questions. What questions are we going to be asking? And sometimes data helps us ask those questions, but sometimes having those questions predetermined allows us to look at the data in a new way, and potentially offering additional courses, additional training. Maybe it's who's doing the training. Maybe it's the approach of the training. Maybe it's what are we going to look like in 5 years, 10 years, whatever those questions might be. Who's taking our courses? All of those important demographical pieces. And then also speaking to the culture, like who do we want to be, and are we developing and using our data to support that? So, if our goal is to be more inclusive, then making sure that our data is tracking that, the inclusivity and the who's taking the courses, that diversibility piece of things, and really paying attention to all of those elements. Data can be so incredibly important and powerful.
Yeah, absolutely. And doing it systematically makes it have even more power and really opens that door to more opportunity, which you'll see here. So some of those examples that Cindy was mentioning about you kind of maybe predetermining what are the questions you're going to ask for that feedback piece, or maybe deciding ahead of time as instructors, kind of what is your I guess kind of the look and the feel, what are the guidelines of the training? What is it going to look like? Are we going to template this out so we're all starting from the same starting point, right? So no matter who's kind of building the training, it's very systematic approach in how the training gets built and where you start and move forward as a group, as a collective. And I would like to know a little bit more about what you all do from a systematic approach. Do you guys have any other ideas or things that you all do maybe as a team that helps drive data in a more systematic way?
Yeah, Wei was just talking about our own biases, and
Yes.
Wei, I am so glad you brought that up, because you are absolutely correct. The biases we bring to the table is the lens that we use to look at that data. I had the opportunity to be talking about this very same thing with some other colleagues within Saif, and one of the questions is, if you have somebody that has sight limitations, how do they look at a graph? And there's sonification, and there's some other things that are really, really interesting, and I hope gain some traction. But simply putting an alt text on a graph, which is what seems to be the common solution, implies that I'm using my biases to decide what is that person going to look at the graph and understand. That's terrifying. That's in my mind, a terrifying thought of, I don't want to be a single brain. If we're in a group, as we are, of 10 of us, great, fantastic. Let's take advantage of 10 brains, not just one. So Wei, I appreciate you mentioning that. Thank you.
Right. And maybe that goes back to kind of what graphs do you use, for instance? So you're using that data to drive kind of maybe what the future choices are when you're trying to build training in the future.
Right. Exactly. So we're going to let you continue to add in your systematic practices that Kelsey invited you to tuck into the chat. So Kelsey and I will continue to be watching that and learning from you in that way. So you may be, I suspect, very familiar with adult learning and adult learning theories of whether, again, lots of Knowles, Kolb, that sort of thing. You may be very familiar with their work, but I want to just break this down and just look at this as it relates to VILT more specifically. So, we as adults, we like to actively participate. We want to be in the middle of things. And obviously there's some propensities and some preferences that play into that. But we like to have that active involvement. And one thing that you may be familiar with already is that 20-minute rule. 20 minutes has gone by, there should be an active engagement piece. 20, if it's less than 20 minutes, great. But again, that 20-minute threshold is really important. And this is another space for that UDL and that choice. And how can you digest this information? You might be familiar. I was just going to share a tool and it has promptly left my brain. I will come up with it and I will make sure that it's in our resources, so you can take a look at them in a little bit. But essentially it is, and if you all can think of what the name of this is, please put it in the chat and help my brain a little bit.
This is just a little bit of a game. So
yeah, absolutely,
Cindy's going to describe it and then you're going to chat it.
Yes, please. Yes, please. So essentially it's, I was using hyperlinks, which gave me the name HyperDocs. You may be familiar with that particular strategy. So you give a learner a single sheet of paper, a single slide deck, and it's up to them which order they do things in and how they interact back. So again, that active participation and choice is an element of that. Having repetition, I certainly do not mean boring. We don't want boring, but we want some kind of predictability, how a course is built, the types of tools that we are consistently using, so that the concentration then is about the content. It's not.
All right. I was wondering if it was me that froze, because sometimes I am the one that actually dropped. So I was hoping that maybe that wasn't just me. Yes. So Cindy will be back on shortly, I am sure. Oh, here she is right now. But as she was saying, just having repetition, we don't mean having to, I know, oh, the internet. Yes, I know. I mean, a year into doing online training, right? You never know what you're going to expect or what you might have to overcome in the meantime. But hey, it's makes it fun, right? We're all here just learning and making the best of every situation. So absolutely, gotta love the internet sometimes. No worries at all. So until Cindy can get back up, I'll continue us on here. But also, adult learners like to see relevance, right? So I'm sure you all signed up today because our description sparked your interest in some way, or maybe there is a challenge or something that you have coming up in your own work that is relevant to you, that you wanted to come on here and make sure that you could maybe grab that nugget and immediately apply it to something that you're trying to solve. So we need relevance, right? I mean, we go on YouTube, right, when we need to solve something really quickly, and we're usually, just we're trying to solve something specific to what we need in that moment. And we, like I said, need to quickly apply it. Absolutely. And then giving feedback. So it looks like Cindy's back here. But we love immediate feedback, and we like to get feedback, and we like to give feedback, and we like to be able to direct the path, direct the learning going forward, which is why we have tried throughout this entire presentation too, to really gather your thoughts and your like where you want this to head, right? Because that's super important as an adult learner to have that autonomy and that power of choice. And Cindy, you're back. Hey.
Yeah, that was a surprise. Everything went black.
No
So,
worries. No
so
worries.
thank you.
Yes, we love to be in charge of our education. Absolutely. And Cindy, I'll give it back to you to add any thoughts you wanted to on some of these. I know you have some great examples.
Yeah, thank you. I was able to hear much of what you shared, Kelsey. So, again, I think that we collectively could add our own examples in there. So I don't want to take away from that. So if you have a thought of a student or a group of students that you're like, you know what, this is that student, we would love to be able to hear about that. I will just make a quick note as you're kind of thinking about that person. I've also taught in K-12, and I had a very disenchanted student. I tended to teach those types of students. That's who typically came to me. And this particular student would skip most of the day. And I would ask him, I'm like, so, you're here, like, tell me more. And he's like, yeah, and again, adult learning, well, he wasn't an adult legally. this absolutely applied to him. He was an active participant. He was allowed to have some kind of regulated expectation in terms of he knew what he was going to get when he came to class. And I am not saying that I was the teacher. What I am saying is that these principles relate to students of all types, abilities, and content areas. So again, a very powerful tool set.
Yeah. Well, and Cindy, it sounds like that particular student understood the why and the purpose and what, like you said, what was going to be gained from going to that class.
Right.
So very engaged from the beginning.
Yes.
All right. Yes. So we would like you all to add your thoughts, resources to our Padlet. And Cindy has this nice bit.ly for us. So you can either use that QR code to pull it up from your phone, or if you'd like to type the URL into your browser, in your preferred browser.
Yeah, and I see Amy tucked that into the chat for all of us to see. Thank you, Amy.
Yes, thank you so much for that. And I'll go ahead and actually, I'm going to swap my screen over to this Padlet so we can kind of.
Yeah, as Kelsey's doing that, to use this Padlet, for those of you that may not be familiar, you're going to go ahead, you'll see a different category. You'll see actively participate, have repetition, all of these important elements that we as adult learners like to have. And since this group tends to provide learning opportunities for adults, this is obviously very relevant. Under each of those categories, fantastic. There is a plus, a circle with a plus in it. You're going to click on that. You have the option of putting in a link, putting in a comment. Maybe you want to record your voice. Maybe you want to draw a picture. You have a lot of different options in here. And so you see Kelsey's screen. She's got the Padlet up so we can actually see all the different things that you're adding. And these tend to be, these are anonymous. Your name isn't necessarily associated unless you feel like that's helpful for people to be able to circle back to you because if it's a programmatic piece or they want to get more information.
Yeah, so there's multiple ways for you to engage in this, like Cindy said. So if you wanted to record your voice or record your screen, maybe there's a cool tool we should all know about that you're utilizing, or maybe there's a link to something or a YouTube. There's so many options for you here to engage in this content and add. And you, of course, will have access to this forever. So you could continue adding here. So even after today, you can continue to engage in this content in this class and keep sharing with each other different resources related to adult learning and VILT.
Yes. And should you want to have this as a reference tool and not wanting to call it up as a specific website, you may be already familiar with this, but you can actually download any Padlet as a PDF, and any links that have been put in there are still active. So it's a nice option. So you just go to export.
Yep.
Hit those three little dots and you go to export and it goes into a PDF.
Yep. Lots of different options for you.
Yes.
And it's exciting seeing all of these things popping up in real time.
Thank you for this. I'm looking forward to really kind of digging in and reading more fully your ideas and think about how I can implement these in the various VILTs that I facilitate.
All right, so I'm going to hop back to our presentation, but please keep those coming. And again, that link is for you to keep. So keep engaging with that even after today, because we can all continue to add things to it and stay connected that way. So now let's go back to kind of an overview of what we've accomplished today. So really, we focused on UDL. What does UDL mean? What are the different components to that? How could you maybe incorporate that into some of your learning opportunities in virtual spaces? We talked about data. There's an option for you to, in that Padlet, even to add some different tools. So we have that VILT section at the very end there where we started to pre-populate things, but that's a place for you to continue to add things. And I know that there were some resources shared in the chat too. So we'll get that in there in that Padlet too. And then also understanding kind of adult learning best practices and thinking about ways that you can systematically implement those, whether that's with templates or, making design element decisions early on, or predetermining what your feedback is going to look like. Whatever those things are, getting your team together and determining those is going to open that door to some other opportunities and help, grow and, develop training that is going to really give you a good return on investment and meet the needs of your learners, right? At the end of the day, that's what we really want. We want people to walk away with getting what they need, right? So that's why we'd like to also ask you kind of what you think your next steps will be after today. Do you have any questions for us that are still lingering? You can chat those. We have some time here to address that. Has there been anything that maybe has stopped your curiosity? This is just a great activity because not only is this something that provides you with an opportunity to give us feedback, but it also helps with that transference, that application, all of those things that we want to make sure we're giving to our adult learners, right? But it also provides Cindy and I with an opportunity to get feedback too, and continue to grow and learn, because we are in a room of experts as well. So we have lots to learn. We want to learn from you. So if you could chat us, be something you're excited about, something you're going to do now. What's your next step after today? What's a nugget you're going to take with you and apply immediately? What's a question maybe you still have about one of these things, or maybe what's something that may have stopped your curiosity? So feel free to chat with us in that. And I think at this time we could probably allow people to talk as well if they'd like.
Great. So I'm seeing some interest in following up on some UDL systemic practice, maybe doing a little bit more research. So that's great. Super, Amy. And using and leveraging data for those instructional decisions. That's great.
Perfect. And you all should have the ability now to unmute or come on video, whatever you would like. Again, however you want to engage with us today. If you would like to chat with us, we're going to be around for a little bit. It's 11 now, so we want to be respectful of your time, but we really, appreciate you being here with us today. And I don't know, Cindy, do you have any closing thoughts?
Yeah. So, again, it has been a pleasure, and appreciate what you all have brought to our conversation today and the expertise that you have shared. I'm looking forward to really looking at the chat more fully and looking at the ideas that you're putting into the Padlet. Those are all fantastic. So Kelsey and I shared out the various elements of being that superhero, having those skills being brought forward, but also recognizing that all of us can take those things and bring our superheroes to our next VILT. So thank you so much for being here today. And while this is the recording, I'm assuming will be stopped. If you would like to connect with us, we'd be happy to answer any questions that you might have. Understanding that if you need to go because the time is over,
Yes.
that's okay.
Yep, absolutely. But we are here if you do have some more questions.
So thank you, Anna, for facilitating, and Amy for your help today, and Velda.
Yes, thank you so much. What a wonderful presentation. We have such a great caliber of people and with amazing knowledge and experience in our community. And we are very, very thankful that you took the time to share with us this great presentation. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. And it is 11:02. Love to stay longer and chat. But I'm going to stop recording and stop the video now. Thank you again for everyone who joined. We are going to make this available on the NWeLearn website, so anyone will be able to access within the next week, within the next few days. And everyone have a wonderful day.
Great. Thank you
Yes,
very much.
thank you all. We appreciate you having us here.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you.